Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I'm going to be doing a pretty brief review of We'll Save the Galaxy for Food by Yahtzee Croshaw. Because of the nature of this story, I don't feel like I can spoil anything about this book because part of the humor and the journey of the book is not knowing what comes next, so this is going to be a completely spoiler-free review. For any of you who are video gamers, you may actually be familiar with Yahtzee already if you ever watched his Zero Punctuation series on the channel The Escapist. He's this sarcastic British man who over-exaggerates about every negative detail of a game, usually to hilarious effect. I used to watch him all the time years ago, so I felt like I was pretty confident in knowing what his sense of humor was like and what I might reasonably be able to expect from a book that he wrote. We'll Save the Galaxy for Food is the story of a nameless ex-star pilot who is hired to masquerade as the famous novelist Jacques Miquillon. What he doesn't know is that one of the most powerful men in the galaxy is responsible for hiring him, and this misfortune is going to lead him on a not quite epic adventure. My confidence that I was going to enjoy this story took a very sharp downturn in the first couple chapters because I didn't like the slang, I thought the jokes were tasteless, and our main character is a total asshole. Fortunately, by the time we get to chapter 3, we are introduced to the character of Warden, who is a really important part of the story, and that's when things start to pick up. And chapter 3 is pretty soon into this book. It doesn't take very long. It actually starts on page 19, so I really only hated about the first 20 pages. And then I can confidently say that from pages 19 to 165, which is this section of the story, and really over the halfway point, I loved this. This was like a solid 4 to 4.5 stars. I thought the story was great. I thought it had a lot of really funny moments. Any blue tabs that you see are times when I thought that the book was genuinely funny, like laugh out loud funny, which is a great sign for a book that is supposed to be comedic. Unfortunately, by the time we get to chapter 18 up until like the very end, like the last 1 or 2 chapters of the book, this part is a solid 3. You can even see here that there's only one like little blue tab in here that I thought was funny, and I didn't tab up a whole lot of the rest of this part of the book just because there wasn't a lot going on. And then the very last section here was a solid 5 stars. So to say that this book kind of put me through the ringer in terms of my feelings about it and what rating to give it would be an understatement. Most books that I read, I can reasonably tell what rating they are going to receive by about the halfway point. Now, not always. Sometimes the ending of a book will make or break a story, but this one was really just all over the place. It's not often that I read a book that divides my own opinion. So yes, I genuinely chuckled at some parts. I mostly enjoyed the characters. I liked their motivations. Some of the world building was really good. It felt like Croshaw was trying to make at least some of the jokes Douglas Adams-esque, and unfortunately, with the nature of satirical or comedic science fiction stories, you by default end up getting compared to Douglas Adams because Douglas Adams was the one who did it best. I want to talk briefly about the parts of the world building that I really enjoyed, and the first are the ex-star pilots. So in this universe, the star pilots were people who used to sail out into the blackness of space. They would save worlds, they were heroes, they would have epics written about them, and now they're just a bunch of has-beens. And the reason that they're has-beens is because in this universe, quantum tunneling has been discovered. Quantum tunneling, or quan tunneling as they call it, makes it to where people no longer even have to venture out into space if they don't want to, because you can just queue up at any quan tunneling machine, and as long as there is another one on some other side, on some other planet, you can travel there instantly. So now all of these ex-star pilots are out of a job, and they try to scrounge around by essentially offering tours to people when they're traveling from one place to another, saying, hey, do you want to see what it used to be like to be a star pilot? Let me take you up into space. I also have discovered this year that apparently I really enjoy books that have some level of government or politics that are involved in them, which is not something I ever thought I would enjoy, but I do. So I want to talk about the United Republic, which is the government of the people people who are still on Earth. They refer to themselves as Terrans. So in this universe, Earth was dying and people were forced to leave in order to create other colonies, but some wanted to stay, and those people became fiercely insular and protective of their world. So now anybody who even tries to approach with a ship who doesn't belong there will just get blown out of the sky. But on top of that, the United Republic also watches all of the people who are on Earth as well, because they don't want anybody to leave. And I just think that that's a really nice bit of world building. Those are aspects of this book that I greatly enjoyed. But there really isn't a lot more to this story outside of that. It's meant to be fun, not substantive, and that's fine. Some books are like that. Not everything needs to be serious all the time. But it also means that it's not really my kind of story, because since not a lot happens, the universe feels pretty bland and shallow. It doesn't have enough character. Which leads me to talking about the title of this book, Will Save the Galaxy for Food. That is a misnomer. There is no galaxy saving in this story, and that quip that I made earlier about a not quite epic adventure, well, guess what? I got that right from the back of this book. So even Yahtzee knew that it's like, there's really not a lot going on here. And they turned it into the marketing of this book. That in itself is a joke. It's a small-scale story compared to an epic space adventure. It's also significantly raunchier than Adam's writing, so if your sense of humor tends to lean that way, you may find this book absolutely hysterical. This story has flashes of humor, but it's not humorous in terms of like every sentence is leading up to some sort of joke the way that usually Douglas Adams' writing is, and it also doesn't move as quickly. So with Adams, you know that you're just snap of your finger constantly moving from set piece to set piece. This story is much slower. You know where you are at all times in this book. And that might be a good thing for you depending on how you like your stories. Maybe you don't really enjoy the way that Adams writes where you're constantly blipping from one thing to the next. Maybe you want to be able to follow the thread of the story and it not seem so absurd. This might be that book for you. I will say for my sense of humor that I tend to prefer more tongue-in-cheek jokes or puns rather than just overtly crude humor. Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett both talk about like sex and physical anatomy in their books, but they do it in such a way where they're always skirting around the topic to where the joke is really them being like, you know what I'm talking about. And that's what makes it funny. I don't really need the joke explained to me. I don't need somebody to just outright say it. And I did mean what I said earlier about some of the jokes being tasteless. And I can guarantee that somebody who has read this book would go into the comments and say, well, you just don't have a sense of humor. And let me explain something right now. If by I don't have a sense of humor, that means that I don't find jokes about raping dogs funny, or I don't enjoy jokes about our main character saying, well, I have a choice between being a transvestite hooker or a space pirate, and transvestite hooking's easier to explain to Dad. If not finding that funny means that I don't have a sense of humor, then you're right. I absolutely don't. Because it's not funny, it's tasteless and it's cringy, and that's not the kind of thing that I like to read. I will say very quickly that those jokes are the ones that are in the first 20 pages. That is the reason why I disliked the beginning of this book so much and why I felt like our main character was such an unlikable asshole, is because he inwardly and outwardly made jokes like that. It significantly diminishes throughout the rest of the novel, and yes, there are some off-color jokes here and there, but it's not nearly as bad as the first 2 chapters. I don't really know why Yahtzee put those at the beginning of the story and then felt like maybe I shouldn't through the rest of it, but I'm really glad that he didn't, because it would have completely ruined this novel for me. One other comment I want to make about the way this story is written is the character of Warden, who is present through most of this story. It is constantly referenced how cold and unfeeling she is. Like, if it's not on every page of this story, it genuinely feels like there's a comment every other page, and it's just exhausting to read. At some point, and I can't remember where I was in the book, I genuinely was just sitting there going, I get it. Please stop saying it. I understand. But even though I found parts of this book exhausting, the ending was truly great. I really enjoy that even though this story has a sequel, that it is wrapped up enough at the end that you can either choose to move into the sequel immediately after, or you can end it here. The ending is nice enough wrapped up that you don't have to continue if you don't want to. And I don't think that enough books that are designed to be a part of a series do that. If I have to give a rating and I combine all of my feelings about the sections of this book into one score, I feel like it comes out as a very fair 3.5 stars. Now I'm going to do something in this video that I normally don't do in my reviews, and that is provide an alternate recommendation for this book that I enjoyed a lot more that is in a similar style. And that book is Space Opera by Catherine M. Valenti, and this is essentially Eurovision meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I love this. I gave this 5 stars. But in saying that, I also want to be fair and note that my opinion that Space Opera is better than We'll Save the Galaxy for Food is actually an unpopular one, because We'll Save the Galaxy for Food has a higher average star rating than Space Opera. Now, this book doesn't have nearly as many ratings on Goodreads as Space Opera, so that's also partially why the averages are going to be a little bit different, but people tend to like this one more. You may end up really liking this book and hating this one, or you may agree with me and think Space Opera is the bomb and this is just not up your alley. But either way, I would actually recommend that you read both of them, because I know that my opinion about this is lower than the average rating. And you might really like it. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you not to read it. I'm just going to tell you that I don't have great feelings about it, and that I don't necessarily really want to read the sequel, but I might, just because Keaton already owns a copy of it, and I kind of want to see if the sequel is any better than this. So with that, thank you so much for watching. If you have already read We'll Save the Galaxy for Food, please comment down below what you thought of it, or maybe I have even piqued your interest to read this, and if that's the case, please let me know that as well. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.